I never expected a routine visit to the Royal Armouries Museum in Leeds to turn into a dive deep into a secret that felt ripped from the pages of a historical thriller. It started innocently enough, me, a Londoner, with a habit of poking around dusty corners of old museums, trying to find something no one else had noticed. That's how I stumbled upon it, in a dimly lit room tucked away behind racks of gleaming swords and tarnished helmets. There it was, a curious copper globe, resting against the far wall like an outcast among the museum's glittering treasures. Unlike the polished gold crowns and jeweled scepters, this globe didn't catch your eye with sparkle or shine. Instead, it wore a quiet patina of age, its surface a muted, burnished brown. There was no plaque, no label, not even a hint on the official guide app. It was as if the museum wanted it to be invisible. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass, and noticed the intricate engravings. The globe wasn't just decorative. It was a precise, painstakingly crafted artifact dated 1746. At first glance, it looked like any other old map, but the details made my heart skip a beat. This wasn't the world I'd learned about in history class. There, etched in fine Latin script and accented with flourishes of Italian and Spanish, was a vast landmass called Great Tartaria. I blinked. Tartaria? That was supposed to be a myth, a legend from forgotten tales, not a sprawling empire stretching across what we now know as Siberia in Central Asia. The globe showed borders, cities, mountain ranges, an entire civilization erased from modern maps and textbooks. The English countryside felt a world away from this copper-orbed secret. I imagined Empress Elizabeth, dressed in her royal gown of deep blue velvet trimmed with pearls, the kind of woman who could command entire armies with a look, holding this globe perhaps as a reminder of a powerful neighbor the world had forgotten. It was like finding a secret diary in the Queen's own chambers, a diary that contradicted everything official history told us. What made it stranger was the language, Latin, not English or Russian, which would have been more logical for a royal gift. Was this a nod to the international scientific community of the time, or a deliberate code? And why was the globe placed with its back to the visitors, hiding the most important inscriptions from prying eyes? I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. Well, I muttered, if you want to hide something in plain sight, just make it look boring enough to be ignored. But beneath that dull surface lay a puzzle that was about to pull me into a web of intrigue, far beyond the polished floors of the armories. As I stood there, a museum guard gave me a sharp look and stepped closer. "No photos," he said, voice low but firm. "And step back, please." I smiled politely, backing away, but my mind raced. This globe wasn't just a forgotten relic. It was a challenge, a whisper from history daring me to uncover its truth, and I was about to accept it. The guard's warning echoed in my ears as I retreated from the glass case, but curiosity had already taken root. That copper globe wasn't just an old curiosity, it was a locked door, and I was itching to find the key. Back in my flat in York, I spread out my notes and began piecing together what little I'd managed to capture in my memory. The first thing that struck me was the globe's sheer complexity. It wasn't a simple sphere with a painted map slapped on. It was a precision instrument. I remembered the delicate brass rings and tiny, interlocking discs circling the globe's equator and poles. They looked like they belonged on a Victorian clock, not an 18th century map. I half expected the thing to start ticking like Big Ben. I tried to imagine the craftsman who'd made this piece, probably someone like Isaac Buckner, an English clockmaker and scientific instrument maker, rumored to have served the royal court during that era. Maybe he'd been commissioned to build this globe for Queen Elizabeth herself, a secret gift from a scientist who knew more than he was allowed to say. Then came the language puzzle. Why Latin? It was the scholarly lingua franca of the time. Sure, but still, a globe made for an English monarch would more naturally bear English names, wouldn't it? Unless this was a message meant for select eyes only, hidden behind the veil of a universal tongue. It was like receiving a love letter written in code. Not everyone was meant to understand. I pulled out an old atlas from the 1740s I'd borrowed from the university library. Flipping through its fragile pages, the difference was striking. The official map showed Siberia as a vast, empty expanse under Russian control, dotted with tiny settlements and vague borders. But this globe's engraving told a different story, a sprawling empire with defined cities, fortified walls, and even what looked like trading ports along the Caspian Sea. I couldn't get the image of that massive land, Great Tartaria, out of my head. The name sounded like something out of a fantasy novel, yet here it was, etched into copper as solid as the truth. It was as if history itself had accidentally left a crack in its armor, a crack I was poised to pry open. I decided to reach out to Dr. Emily Carter, a historian specializing in 18th century cartography at the University of Leeds. If anyone could help me make sense of this globe, it was her. I called her number, trying to sound casual, though my fingers trembled slightly. Dr. Carter, I've come across something unusual, I began. An artifact that doesn't quite fit with what we know about the period. Unusual is my middle name, she replied with a laugh. Send me what you have, and let's see if we can unravel this mystery together. On the other end of the line, I could almost see her, probably wearing one of those smart blazers with elbow patches, glasses perched at the tip of her nose, the kind of woman who'd put Indiana Jones to shame. I half expected her to pull out a magnifying glass and start muttering about the politics of map-making. As I hung up, I caught my reflection in the window. For a moment, I thought I saw the globe's shadow flicker behind me, as if urging me onward. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a relic. It was a puzzle wrapped in centuries of silence, and I was the one holding the first piece. The next morning, I found myself back at the Royal Armories, this time armed with a notepad, a discreet pair of reading glasses, and a determination that bordered on obsession. I figured if the globe was hidden in plain sight, then maybe a closer look, without the guard's eagle eye, could reveal something new. Of course, I wasn't planning to steal it. I'm no pirate, just a curious bloke with a knack for getting into trouble. The museum was quieter than usual, the echo of footsteps bouncing off stone walls as I circled the display. The globe rested against the wall exactly as before, its copper surface dull under the soft lighting. I could almost swear it was smirking at me, daring me to unlock its secrets. I crouched down to examine the brass rings encircling the sphere. They were engraved with Roman numerals, celestial symbols, and tiny scales marked from 0 to 360 degrees. It looked like a clock, an astrolabe, and a map all rolled into one. I ran my fingers over the cool metal, imagining the hands of time ticking backward, revealing forgotten worlds. A sudden pang of amusement hit me. If only this thing told me when to stop poking around, I muttered. My wife's been asking that question for years. Leaning in closer, I noticed something peculiar on the globe's eastern side. There, where modern maps show the Korean peninsula and Japan as separate, isolated islands, this globe depicted Japan as an expansive continental power, its borders stretching over Korea and beyond. The engraving was so fine I could see tiny cities clustered along the coasts, their names etched in Latin, elegant and deliberate. It was a stark contrast to the history books, which painted Japan in the mid-18th century as an isolationist island nation, closed off to most of the world. Here Japan looked like a titan, sprawling and dominant, a detail that should have rewritten textbooks if anyone had bothered to notice. My mind wandered to the Great Wall of China, also visible on the globe, unlike the tourist postcards showing it as a meandering relic. On this globe, it was a clear, imposing border. It separated Chinese Tartary from the lands beyond, a political boundary, not just a defensive wall, a line drawn in metal that whispered of forgotten empires and old rivalries. I straightened up, feeling the weight of the silence around me. The other visitors strolled past, eyes glazed over at the more glamorous exhibits. They didn't see this globe's secret. No one did, except maybe the museum staff, who seemed to guard it like a sleeping dragon. I caught a glimpse of the back of the globe, the side pressed firmly against the wall. It was frustrating not to see the full inscription or the relief of the double-headed eagle carved there, symbols of imperial power and mystery. I wondered if that side held the real key. After all, secrets love to hide where no one looks. Suddenly, a voice interrupted my thoughts. Quite the piece, isn't it? A woman's voice, smooth but curious. I turned to see a tall woman approaching, her dark hair pulled back in a loose bun. She wore a deep green dress that hugged her figure just enough to be elegant, with a delicate gold chain around her neck catching the light. Her eyes sparkled with intelligence, and something else I couldn't quite place. I'm Sarah, she said, extending a hand. I work with the museum's archives. I couldn't help overhearing your questions about the globe. I shook her hand, surprised but intrigued. James, I replied. And yes, I've stumbled onto something that doesn't add up. Have you heard anything about it? She smiled, but it was a secretive smile. More than I probably should. Come with me. There's something you need to see. As she led me down a narrow corridor away from the exhibit halls, I realized this mystery was about to get a lot deeper and a lot more dangerous. Because in the shadows of the museum, buried beneath layers of dust and silence, was a story someone had fought hard to keep hidden. And now, I was right in the middle of it. The narrow corridor felt colder than the main halls, shadows pooling in the corners like they were waiting to pounce. Sarah moved confidently ahead, her heels clicking softly against the stone floor. I tried to keep up, my mind racing faster than my legs. If this was the beginning of a conspiracy, I hoped I wasn't about to become the next missing historian headline. We stopped before a heavy oak door, its surface scarred by time and countless secrets. Sarah pulled a key from a slim leather pouch at her waist and unlocked it with a satisfying click. The door creaked open to reveal a cramped room filled with shelves groaning under the weight of dusty tomes, ancient manuscripts, and weathered maps. The air smelled of old paper and something faintly metallic, like the copper globe itself. This is the museum's restricted archive, she explained, pulling on a pair of thin gloves. Most visitors never get past the exhibit halls. What you're looking for isn't in the public records. I swallowed hard and followed her deeper inside. She reached for a leather-bound volume, its spine cracked but the gold lettering still gleaming. Cartographic Mysteries of the 18th Century. This globe, Sarah said, has been whispered about in these circles for decades. But official records? Nothing. It's like it was erased from history. Intentionally. I raised an eyebrow. Erased? Sounds like you're describing my last relationship. She laughed softly, the sound a brief release in the tense room. Then her expression grew serious again. Look here. She opened the book to a page showing a faded engraving of a globe remarkably similar to the one I'd seen. Great Tartary is mentioned, but only in passing. Most scholars dismissed it as a myth or a cartographer's fantasy. I traced the outline of the continent on the page, noting the sprawling borders and cities labeled in Latin. But on the globe, it wasn't fantasy. It was real. And the level of detail suggests the maker had access to information far beyond what was publicly known. Sarah nodded. Exactly. It's like this globe was made for someone who needed the truth. Hidden in plain sight, but coded enough to keep others in the dark. She flipped through the pages and stopped at a faded letter, written in an elegant 18th century hand. This is from a scholar named Henry Ashcroft. He hinted at a secret society of map makers and scientists who guarded knowledge that could reshape empires and rewrite history. They called themselves the custodians. I blinked. Secret society? Sounds like something out of a Dan Brown novel. Maybe, Sarah admitted, but when you dig into the archives, you find breadcrumbs, not just legends. There are records of expeditions, lost manuscripts, even instruments like your globe, all tied to this group. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. The globe wasn't just a curiosity, it was a key to a hidden world of knowledge and power. And if the custodians were real, their influence might still be lurking in the shadows. Sarah closed the book gently. There's one more thing. The inscription on the globe's hidden side, the part pressed against the wall. It's in Russian and Latin, dedicating the piece to Queen Elizabeth. But it calls the instrument a universal sundial. Not just a map, but a scientific device to measure time and celestial events. I ran a hand through my hair. So, it's a clock, a map, and a secret message all rolled into one? Exactly. And that changes everything. If it's a working instrument, every detail on that globe had to be accurate. That means Great Tartaria and the other anomalies weren't mistakes. They were facts. I looked at Sarah, her eyes shining with the thrill of discovery. So what's the catch? Why hide it all? She smiled, but it was edged with caution. Because some truths are dangerous, James. And the more we uncover, the more we risk upsetting powerful people who want history to stay exactly as it is. As I left the archive room, clutching a photocopy of Ashcroft's letter, I realized this was no longer just an academic quest. It was a race against time, and whoever else was watching from the shadows. And somewhere, deep within the folds of that copper globe, lay a secret waiting to change everything. Back in my flat that evening, the weight of the day's discoveries pressed down on me like the thick Yorkshire fog outside my window. I sat hunched over the photocopy of Henry Ashcroft's letter, tracing the elegant script with my finger, as if I could summon the man himself. A secret society of mapmakers, the custodians, guarding knowledge powerful enough to rewrite history. It sounded like the start of a bad spy novel, yet here I was, caught in its middle. I poured myself a cup of tea, trying to steady my nerves. The kettle's whistle was the only sound breaking the silence. Well, James, I muttered, looks like you've stumbled into the 18th century's version of the Avengers. I imagined a group of bespectacled scholars in waistcoats, wielding compasses and sextants instead of superpowers. My phone buzzed, jolting me from my thoughts. It was Sarah. Meet me at the Crown and Anchor in York, 8 p.m. There's more you need to see. And yes, I promise it's not a secret society recruiting meeting. Probably. I smirked. Couldn't resist, huh? Later that evening, the Crown and Anchor was alive with chatter and the clink of pint glasses. The pub's wooden beams and flickering candlelight gave it a cozy feel, like a place where conspiracies had been born and buried for centuries. Sarah was already there, tucked into a corner booth, her green dress catching the firelight, the gold chain from earlier now replaced by a delicate pendant shaped like a compass rose. Glad you made it, she said, sliding a thick envelope across the table. I opened it carefully. Inside were copies of old maps, letters, and a strange folded parchment covered with intricate diagrams. What is all this? Documents from the custodian's own archives, she whispered, or what's left of them. They hint at expeditions into Tartaria, long before any official Russian or British explorer set foot there. Some even suggest that Tartaria had advanced cities with technologies lost to time. I raised an eyebrow. Lost tech? Like steam-powered airships or something? Sarah chuckled. Maybe not quite that dramatic, but certainly tools and knowledge far ahead of their time. The globe's makers had to have access to this information. It wasn't just hearsay. I traced the lines on one of the maps, noticing how the rivers crisscrossed the Sahara, where modern maps show endless desert. So, the Sahara wasn't always a desert? Exactly, Sarah said, her voice low but intense. This globe implies a different climate, different geography, even different political realities. Entire empires erased, climates shifted. It's like someone rewrote history and hid the original. I leaned back, swirling the remains of my beer. And you think this custodians group was behind the cover-up? She nodded. Or at least tried to protect the knowledge from falling into the wrong hands. But there are forces even today who don't want this history uncovered. People who'd rather keep us all in the dark. A chill ran down my spine. Sounds like I picked the wrong hobby. I should have stuck to birdwatching. Sarah smiled wryly. Too late now. You're in it, James. And there's one more thing. She slid the folded parchment across the table. This is a blueprint for the globe's mechanism, a complex astronomical calculator. If we can understand how it works, we might unlock even more secrets. I unfolded the parchment carefully. The drawings were delicate, precise, like the work of a master craftsman obsessed with perfection. Rings within rings, axes and discs labeled in Latin, all interconnected in a dance of metal and math. I looked up at Sarah, excitement bubbling beneath the surface. You know, I always thought history was boring. Turns out it's just been waiting for someone to mess with it. She grinned. Welcome to the club. As the pub's clock chimed midnight, I realized we were standing on the edge of something huge. The copper globe was no mere artifact. It was a gateway to a forgotten world. And the deeper we dug, the darker the secrets became. Outside, the night stretched endless and full of shadows. Somewhere in the distance, the past was whispering my name. The days that followed were a blur of research, late-night calls, and frantic note-taking. Sarah and I became an unlikely team, part historians, part detectives, chasing threads that seemed to unravel the very fabric of accepted history. Every new detail about the globe and Great Tartaria seemed to pull us deeper into a labyrinth of secrets. One afternoon, we met at the quaint little cafe tucked away in a side street of York, the kind of place where the barista knows your order before you open your mouth. Sarah arrived wearing a tailored gray blazer over a silk blouse, her hair loose and flowing, a subtle perfume trailing behind her. She looked every inch the scholar, but her eyes held that spark of excitement I'd come to recognize, the thrill of the chase. "I found something," she said, sliding a thick folder across the table. Letters from a merchant named Thomas Wycliffe. He traveled through Eastern Europe and Asia in the 1740s. His accounts mention a powerful state called Tartaria, describing vast cities, bustling markets, and armies as large as any in Europe. I frowned. But none of that made it into official history? Precisely. His letters were dismissed as exaggerations or lost in translation. But when you compare his descriptions with the globe, it fits too well to ignore. I sipped my coffee, trying to process it all. So this great Tartaria was real, and powerful enough to rival empires. Sarah nodded. And that's not all. Wycliffe's letters mention a secret council, possibly linked to the custodians, working behind the scenes to protect their knowledge from monarchs and diplomats. I smirked. Secret councils and shadowy groups. At this rate, we should expect a masked ball invitation next. She smiled, but her eyes were serious. It's no joke. The more we uncover, the more dangerous this gets. There are people who want to keep this buried. I glanced around the cafe, half expecting someone in a trench coat to appear out of nowhere. You think we're being watched? Maybe, Sarah said quietly. Which is why we need to be careful. Our conversation was interrupted by a sudden gust of wind that rattled the window panes, and for a moment, the bustling street outside seemed eerily quiet. I caught Sarah's gaze. She felt it too. Changing the subject, I pulled out the blueprint of the globe's mechanism. Have you made any progress on this? She unfolded the delicate parchment, tracing the intricate gears and rings. It's a marvel of precision engineering. The globe isn't just a map. It's an astronomical calculator designed to track celestial events and calculate time anywhere on Earth. I raised an eyebrow. A kind of high-tech sundial? Exactly. And that means the accuracy of the map is critical. If the outlines, borders, or coordinates were wrong, the instrument wouldn't work. I leaned in closer, the gears and dials etched in fine detail. So if the globe shows Great Tartaria and the other anomalies as real, that challenges everything we know about the 18th century world. Sarah nodded gravely. It's a hidden reality encoded in metal and mathematics. As the afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the table, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were only scratching the surface. The globe was a doorway, a key to a lost world of knowledge, power, and secrets. And someone, somewhere, was determined to keep that door firmly shut. I glanced at Sarah, determination hardening in my chest. Ready to open it? I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. Ready as I'll ever be. We decided the next step was to see the globe again, this time with fresh eyes and a plan. The museum's official hours were coming to an end, but Sarah had arranged late access through a contact in the archives, someone who owed her a favor, or maybe owed a favor to curiosity itself. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the terraced roofs of York, we slipped into the quiet halls of the Royal Armories. The museum had transformed, the crowds were gone, replaced by a hush that made every creak and whisper feel amplified. The globe sat in its usual spot against the wall, like an ancient sentinel guarding its secrets in copper and brass. Sarah pulled out a small flashlight, its beam steady and precise. Let's see what they're hiding from us. I crouched down, shining the light around the globe's edges, trying to catch a glimpse of the back pressed against the wall. The copper surface gleamed faintly under the glow, and then I saw it, a faint inscription carved into the metal, partly obscured by age and shadow. Sarah produced a magnifying glass, her fingers steady despite the thrill running through her veins. She traced the Latin words carefully, then looked up with wide eyes. It's a dedication to Queen Elizabeth. But more than that, it calls the globe a universal sundial, an instrument for measuring time by the sun anywhere on Earth. I swallowed hard. So, the globe isn't just a map, it's a scientific instrument. Exactly, Sarah whispered. And that means every detail, the borders, the cities, even the climate features, had to be accurate, because the instrument depends on that accuracy. I let that sink in. The Sahara crisscrossed with rivers, Sakhalin Island already separated from the mainland decades before anyone officially discovered it, and that sprawling empire, Great Tartaria. This wasn't fantasy or error. This was knowledge hidden in plain sight. Just then, a faint noise echoed down the hallway, a soft footstep, distant but deliberate. I glanced at Sarah and she froze, eyes sharp. We're not alone. We weren't. A figure appeared at the end of the corridor, a tall man in a dark coat, his face shadowed but his gaze unmistakably fixed on us. He moved with purpose, and though he didn't say a word, the message was clear. Our little midnight expedition was not welcome. Sarah grabbed my arm, her voice low but urgent. We need to get out. Now! Heart pounding, I followed her down the hall, trying not to look back. The museum that had felt like a sanctuary moments before now seemed like a labyrinth of secrets and danger. As we slipped out into the cool night air, the man's silhouette remained framed in the doorway, a silent guardian of a secret too large to be shared. Outside, under the flickering street lamps, I realized this was no longer just an academic pursuit. We'd stepped into something far bigger, a game where history, power, and mystery collided. And the copper globe was the prize everyone was desperate to control. But as I looked at Sarah, determination blazing in her eyes, I knew one thing for certain. We weren't backing down. And somewhere, in the shadows of the past, the true story of Great Tartaria was waiting to be told. The next morning the sun poured through my curtains, but I barely noticed. Sleep had evaded me, chased away by the lingering image of that dark figure in the museum doorway. Who was he? A security guard? An agent of some secret faction? Or maybe someone who'd been watching the globe's secrets for decades, waiting for the right moment to strike? Sarah and I met again, this time in a small, cluttered office she'd borrowed from a colleague. Maps were scattered everywhere, modern printouts, faded parchments, and photographs of the globe from every angle we could find. We pored over them, piecing together the puzzle like detectives assembling clues at a crime scene. Look here, Sarah said, pointing to the eastern edge of the globe's engraving. See how the Great Wall of China isn't just a defensive structure, but a clear border separating Chinese Tartaria from the rest of the empire? That completely flips the narrative we've been taught. I nodded, tracing the line with my finger. And Japan isn't some isolated island nation. It's a continental power controlling Korea. That's a major geopolitical shift. Exactly. And then there's that archipelago in the Pacific, the archipelago of St. Lazarus. It's huge, about the size of the Philippines, but it vanished from later maps. It's like the globe captures a world that doesn't exist anymore. I leaned back, rubbing my chin. So what happened? Was there some catastrophe that erased these empires and lands? Or was it deliberate? A rewriting of history? Sarah's eyes darkened. That's the million-pound question. And if the globe is a universal sundial, as the inscription says, then its accuracy depends on all these places being real. It's not just a map. It's a scientific instrument relying on data that shouldn't have existed back then. A sudden thought struck me. What if the globe's makers had access to secret knowledge, explorations, technologies that were suppressed? Maybe they were part of that custodians group, trying to preserve the truth. Sarah smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. If so, they failed to keep it safe. Look at the globe's position. It's placed with the back to the public, hiding the dedication and the key inscriptions. The museum's silence isn't accidental. It's a cover-up. I shivered. So this isn't just a forgotten artifact. It's a suppressed history, locked away by people who want us to forget. Suddenly my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging. Some truths are dangerous. I showed it to Sarah. Her face paled. They're watching more closely than we thought. We looked at each other, the weight of the threat settling between us, but neither of us was willing to back down now. The globe had already pulled us into its orbit, and the closer we got, the clearer it became. Great Tartaria was the key to a lost world, a missing chapter of history that could rewrite everything we thought we knew. Outside, the wind howled against the window as if warning us to stop. But inside that little office, two determined souls were ready to face whatever shadows lurked ahead. And somewhere, beneath layers of dust and silence, the copper globe waited, its secrets poised to change the world forever. The following days unfolded like a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. Every lead we chased seemed to vanish just as quickly, and every discovery came with a shadow lurking nearby. Sarah and I found ourselves looking over our shoulders, our conversations peppered with hushed tones and cautious glances. One evening, we met at the riverside park where the city lights flickered against the dark water. Sarah wore a flowing burgundy dress that caught the breeze just enough to suggest elegance without trying too hard. Her fingers toyed nervously with a vintage silver locket, a family heirloom she said kept her grounded when the world felt uncertain. I managed to get hold of an old journal from an explorer named Edward Hargrove, she said, pulling a worn leather-bound book from her bag. He traveled through the Far East in the 1740s and mentioned meeting envoys from Tartaria. He described it as a land of great wealth, advanced cities, and powerful rulers. I flipped through the yellowed pages, the handwriting elegant but hurried. One passage stood out. The people of Tartaria possess knowledge and technologies beyond our comprehension. Their maps are drawn with precision that defies our instruments. They speak of stars and time in ways I have yet to understand. I looked up, the gravity of it sinking in. So they were ahead of their time, scientifically and politically. Sarah nodded. And that's why the globe matters. It's not just a map. It's a testament to a lost civilization's power and knowledge. As the night air cooled, I asked, but why hide it? Why erase them from history? Sarah's eyes glinted. Because acknowledging Tartaria challenges centuries of accepted history. It threatens established powers and narratives. Some truths are too dangerous, too disruptive. A sudden rustle in the bushes made us both tense. We scanned the darkness, but saw nothing. Still, the feeling of being watched was undeniable. I joked to break the tension. If we keep this up, we'll need our own secret handshake. Sarah smiled, but her voice was serious. More like protection. We're poking a bear that's been sleeping for centuries. She closed the journal and looked me in the eye. James, this globe isn't just a relic. It's a message, a warning, maybe even a key. If we can unlock its mechanism, understand its secrets, we might finally bring Tartaria back from the shadows. I swallowed hard. And what if we're not the only ones trying to do that? Her smile faded. Then we're in a race against time and against forces who don't want this history uncovered. The river flowed quietly beneath us, reflecting the city's glow. Somewhere out there, hidden in plain sight, lay the truth, waiting for us to find it. But with every step closer, the danger grew. And the question wasn't just what we discover, but how far we were willing to go to unveil a world deliberately erased. Because some secrets don't want to be found, and some truths come with a price. As we parted that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the globe's final secret was still out there, waiting to change everything. And when it revealed itself, nothing would ever be the same. The night air was thick with anticipation as I returned to my flat. The weight of everything Sarah and I had uncovered pressing down like the Yorkshire rain outside. I stared at the blueprint of the globe's mechanism spread across my desk. The interlocking rings, the brass axes, the delicate inscriptions in Latin, all pointing to something far greater than a mere map. I couldn't shake the thought of Great Tartaria, this forgotten empire sprawling across continents, its cities alive with trade and science, erased from history as if it never existed. The enigma of the globe was no longer just an academic curiosity. It was a reckoning. Suddenly my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown sender. "You're closer than you think, but some doors should never be opened." A chill ran down my spine. Whoever was watching knew we were onto something, and they weren't willing to let it see the light of day. Determined, I grabbed my coat and headed to meet Sarah one last time, this time at an old observatory on the edge of town, a place where the stars told stories older than any history book. She was waiting, her eyes reflecting the glow of the telescope's lens, her dress a soft shade of midnight blue that shimmered under the observatory's dim lights. "We have to activate the globe's mechanism," she said, voice steady but urgent. "Only then will the full truth reveal itself." Together, we carefully reconstructed the globe's brass rings, aligning the scales and axes as the blueprint instructed. The universal sundial wasn't just a model, it was a dynamic instrument designed to calculate time, celestial positions, and perhaps something more. As the final ring clicked into place, the globe began to hum softly, a vibration that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of history itself. Suddenly, a hidden panel slid open on the globe's base, revealing a concealed compartment. Inside lay a folded parchment, ancient, fragile, and inscribed with symbols that defied immediate understanding. Sarah's breath caught. This could be the key to the custodian's greatest secret. Just then, the observatory doors burst open. Shadows poured in, figures cloaked in dark coats, faces obscured by hats and scarves. "Step away from the globe," a voice commanded, cold and unyielding. Heart pounding, I whispered, "They've found us." In that moment, time seemed to freeze. The globe's soft hum grew louder, as if warning us of what was at stake. And as the intruders closed in, the parchment in Sarah's trembling hand seemed to pulse with a light of its own, beckoning us toward a truth that could shatter centuries of silence. The secret of Great Tartaria was no longer buried, it was awakening, and the world would never be the same again.